Good morning, everybody. KT here with Wise Images Photography, and today what we are going to go ahead and discuss is ISOs or ISOs. Which one is it? How do you guys say it? Needless to say, it doesn't matter because they are always used interchangeably, and we are going to talk basically about how we use it, what is it, and why we use it in the first place. So let's get going. Let me take you down memory lane for those of you who probably remember the days of film. I don't know about you guys. Y'all, I really didn't know anything about ISOs back in the day. I basically was like, I took this one class and they had some film involved in the situation, but I don't remember. I just took the camera, whatever was given to me. I went out, I did photography, I came back, or I took some photographs, I came back, put it in the dark room, and I have no recollection about ISOs from when I was in 8th grade. As I have gotten older, of course, now I do have an understanding and concept of them. But basically what ISO deals with is it deals with the speed of the film. And it also deals with how sensitive the film is to light. So that's why a lot of people think it's the sensitivity of the camera sensor to light that deals with the ISOs. But that's really not the case. See, back in the day, if you had a 1600 ISO film, what it would allow you to do is it would make the image brighter, so therefore you could go ahead and increase your shutter speed, which would make things darker, so that way you could get the proper exposure to go ahead and capture that bird. Likewise, if you had a slower ISO film rating, like if you had 100, you would probably be photographing something that was still, because then you wouldn't need your shutter speed to be so fast, and you would probably be capturing like maybe a portrait or something along those lines. And because it was a stationary object, it would be considered a slower speed film, like if you had like 100 ISOs or whatnot. Now, originally they had two scales. They had the American ASA and then they had the German DIN. But the problem with having the two different scales for the ISOs is it got really got confusing. So the International Organization of Standardization, Standardization, they decided to standardize the scale. And basically that's how we got ISOs or ISOs, so that way it wouldn't be so confusing and we would have one standardized method when it comes to film. Now, the International Organization of Standardization actually does this for a lot of different products. So what did this do for digital photography? Basically, we still use ISOs, and they basically do the same thing. They either make things darker or lighter. And the difference, though, is the camera sensor doesn't change. It basically, what technology has allowed us to do is it allows us to amplify the light sensitivity of our sensor to help things go lighter or darker. Now that I've taken you down memory lane and we are talking about how we use it and how it affects our camera, basically what it deals with is the exposure triangle. We have our f-stop, and our f-stop is our aperture, which deals with our depth of field. So whether something is a shallow depth of field or whether or not it is a deep depth of field. Then we have our, I just went blank on what we have, our shutter speed. Our shutter speed deals with whether or not we are going to get motion blur or whether or not we are going to freeze that action. Last but not least, in the exposure triangle, we have our ISOs, which allows things to go lighter or darker. Now, all of these aspects, depending on which one you change, it does make things lighter or darker. But basically, the ISO's sole purpose is making things lighter or darker. How does this affect our camera? So let's say, for example, we are photographing with ISOs around 100. Normally I would shoot at a 100 when I'm in a studio setting. So in this particular case, you are going to get a higher quality image, you're going to get higher dynamic range, and you're also going to get less noise and less grain. So that picture is going to be like, yeah, baby, it's going to look really super good because those ISOs are really low. Now, on the opposite end of that spectrum is if you shoot with a high ISO, let's say 12,000, then basically what's going to happen is you are going to have a lower quality image. You are not going to get good dynamic range. Your colors are all going to be messed up. And then last but not least, you are also going to have a super grainy image. I mean, look at this. This bird was smack dab in the middle of the shade. I bumped up those ISOs and look at that picture. It looks absolutely dreadful. Now, depending on your camera, really depends on how low or how high you can set your ISOs. Newer cameras have like a wider range that they can go. Older cameras, not so much. So you may see some cameras that are like 64 ISO. I think mine is like a 100 or 200 or something like that. So in regards to making images darker, or that light sensitivity a lot lower. Other cameras, like the newer ones, they can go up real super high and you have no problem with the noise and the grain getting really high up there. Of course, once you get to a certain point, you're bound to have some kind of issues. My camera in particular, I used to let it go up to 10,000 ISO. But what I found is I don't like it going to 10,000 ISO. So I've actually set the rating to stop at 8,000 ISO so that way it doesn't go any higher. And depending on what kind of lighting situation I'm in, it can still look pretty rough at that point. The next question that often comes up is like, where do I even put my ISOs? And normally my ISOs are the very first things that I set when I go out to do a session, like whether I'm doing a portrait session, headshot session, or if I'm going out to do some nature photography or whatever type of session I'm going to go do. If I'm going to do the Milky Way or go do some night photography or whatnot, the ISOs are normally the first things I do. And you kind of will learn that there is a little bit of a scale. So let me kind of go through this. If you are going to go ahead and let's say we're doing studio lighting, for example, you're probably going to want to be around a 100, 200 ISO setting. Now, if I go outside and maybe I'm doing a portrait session or maybe I'm doing nature photography, like I'm doing like more landscape kind of deals, something that's more stationary, I will go ahead and set my ISOs probably around 400 to 500 ISOs. Now, if I were going to go outside and do perhaps maybe night photography, or maybe I might be photographing the Milky Way or something like that, then I'll bump my ISOs up to about 8,000. Now, if I am outside and I am photographing birds, you will find that with birds, the camera can think faster than me. So I set my shutter speed how I want it. I set my aperture how I want it. And then when I'm going back and forth, that light is going to change every time I shift my camera. So I set my ISOs to automatic ISO so that way the camera can just go ahead and pick the ISOs that it wants. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of the things that I do is I go ahead and make sure that I have maxed out my ISOs to 8,000 because I don't want it to go over that range, because I don't want to get super grainy images. I really don't like grainy images. But anyways, that's besides the point. So that's kind of where I set some of my levels. Now, the really cool part about digital photography versus film photography, see, back in the day, if you wanted to change your ISOs, you had to burn through your entire roll of film before you could switch your ISOs. The nice thing about digital is we can actually shift and change that ISO setting right there on the fly, so we don't have to wait and burn up a roll of film. So that's actually kind of cool and a neat feature about the fact that we have digital photography now. If you guys are finding value in this, please make sure you guys go ahead and hit that like button for me. Now, the last thing that we are going to go ahead and talk about today is we're going to talk about like why we use it. And you guys know, light and dark. We've discussed that today, but also it helps with that creative aspect in getting that look that you really want for your photography. So why do we use ISOs in the first place? It's to help you get that creative edge. So let's say, for example, you're in a dark situation. You're going to want to bump up those ISOs so that way you have more light, so that way maybe you can go ahead and freeze the shutters. Or you might want to go ahead and, let's say we're in a really bright situation and you don't have, you know, a neutral density filter. You don't have a filter to be able to block out some of that light. What you might want to do is you might want to lower your ISOs. I do this a lot when I am doing landscape photography. And let's say I come across a creek or something and there's some running water. I don't really use a lot of filters, okay? And so what I would do is I would go ahead and lower that ISO, and then that way it makes it darker, and then that way I can slow down that shutter speed a little bit, and then that way I can get a little bit of blur on the water. Maybe you are out and about and you want to photograph the sky. Bump up those ISOs so that way you can go ahead and catch that night sky or catch that Milky Way. Maybe you like that filmy, grainy kind of look. Then you would go ahead and bump up your ISOs so that you can go ahead and achieve that. So really, y'all, I want you to look at ISOs as a tool to help you achieve the look that you want to achieve with your photography. If you guys haven't grabbed your free guide from me, I'm going to go ahead and drop a link down there below for you guys. Go ahead and grab that guide because basically it is about 5 easy steps to help you improve your photography. Make sure you grab that link. I fixed it. It was broken a while back on like all my old videos. Maybe eventually one of these days I'll go back and fix that on the other ones. But it will be down below for you guys to grab. It is an 11-page guide with illustrations and wording and examples so that way you can visually see how to go ahead and improve your photography. So make sure you guys grab that. If you guys want to learn more about the exposure triangle, I do have another video. I'm going to put the link below for you guys. It's about aperture, so definitely go ahead and check it out and see what aperture does. And as you slowly start learning this triangle, you'll start to learn what everything is, and then you'll start making adjustments to your own photography so that you can get that taste and that flavor of what you guys like when it comes to your photographic images. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. Remember, you are awesome. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll see you later, alligator.